Hello and thank you. So joining me, we now have Kuldeep Garatia from Transport for London and Paolo Silva from Robert Bird. Thank you to both of you for joining us today. How are you?
Very well.
Good, thank you. So Paolo, I would like to hand over to you first for your opening comments.
So my name is Paolo Silva. I'm a director with Robert Bird Group. We're a structural engineering, specialist structural engineering firm, originally grown out of Brisbane in Australia. We do everything from structural engineering through to civil, geotechnics, etc. Very specialist in that area, and our USP really is construction engineering. So the Australian market's very D&B focused, and as a result of that, we do a lot of work with contractors, and that's very much part of our culture. Which in a sense leads to, from our perspective, our view of the world on digital twins is really about informing construction and how we build. And we've invested a lot of time in thinking about that. And we've invested very heavily in some tools that help us, essentially 4D BIM tools that help us do that. And I'm here to talk about those today. So these are exciting tools that we use. We find them really useful for clients in terms of de-risking their projects. And so for us, it's something that's of great interest, and it's an area we're significantly investing in.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you, Paolo. And Kuldeep, over to you.
Hi, my name is Kuldeep Garatia. I'm the head of engineering for the Major Programs Directorate in TfL. So I have the privilege of leading the brilliant engineers that are in effect rebuilding and working with our supply chain to really construct the new stations, upgrades, Barking, Riverside Homes, etc., just enabling growth in the city, as it were, in London itself. Transport for London, I think, as everyone knows, provides the integrated transport system to help this city move and breathe, and also build back better after COVID as well.
Lovely. Thank you to both of you. So firstly, can you outline a little bit more kind of how your organisation is using digital twin technology and any specific examples of where digital twins have helped to add kind of significant benefits to those projects? So Kuldeep, if I come to you first.
Yeah, I think for us, I could take it back to 2016. Since then, BIM Level 2 has been baked into our project methodology. So digital twins are developed and are used routinely in our projects. And we are seeing a lot of benefits, especially across our capital programs. So we're getting better, earlier clash detection, more efficient design reviews, and this is where all our parties, our supply chain included, can collectively review the model online, as opposed to sort of physically getting around a multitude of drawings, etc. And in a capital world, program world, that shortens project time and it reduces risk and construction costs. It should be pointed out, though, that the requirement for all parties to collaborate using a common data environment on our projects that's a really significant factor in realizing those benefits. And really, that digital twin, as we call it today, is a result of defining our data requirements and contracting them from the supply chain, and therefore working in that together in that defined collaborative environment. When I look back and I think, okay, where's the best? What's the gold standard? And for me, I think that was the Baker Street to Bond Street tunnel relining. A very complex project to replace the lining on a live line, the Jubilee line. That line needs to be used every morning. That entire program was designed in an environment, a digital environment, and that includes almost the mechanism, the factories we called it, including the environment that the people will be working in and how materials will be delivered and taken away. 4D almost in terms of time. That was designed and run in a digital environment before execution on site. And I think because of that, that's what enabled that program to be such a success. The original timelines were much longer, and not only shortened timelines, I think it also improved safety and gave us far more confidence in terms of what we were doing. So we could enable that line to be used by hundreds of thousands of people in the morning at 9 o'clock, as it were.
Lovely. And Paolo, same question to you. Can you talk us through how Robert Bird is using digital twin technology and also some of those benefits you're seeing coming through?
So many of the benefits I think Kuldeep's just touched upon. Our speciality really is construction engineering, so we always think about how to build. Traditionally, I think many client organisations were happy to push risk onto contractors or into the supply chain, but ultimately they end up carrying that risk and owning the problems that sometimes come with that. as an organisation, we're comfortable working in, let's say, higher risk engineering scenarios. So for us, when we invested in 4D BIM tools, and our tool is called Reveal, it was really about understanding risk. It was understanding how to build, whether things fitted together properly, clash detection, communication, all of that. The benefit we really see, I think, is communication. I think Kuldeep just touched upon that, about understanding the safety environment, understanding how things go together, whether they actually work. And I think there's a real human component to using a digital twin, when you can actually have all the important people that need to know what's going on stood around the screen, and they can interrogate a process. So if you take a design model, we're all now with level 2 BIM bringing things through in a coordinated way. We're now taking that through to the how to build, and at some point, someone will pick that up and take that into the how to operate. But in the how to build, if you like, phase of a project, which is where we specialize, having people look at the screen and understand things, and then say, no, that's wrong, that's right, yes, that works. We just find that really speeds things up. It improves delivery. So all the things that Kuldeep perhaps as a client really needs, which is certainty, high safety, quality, and assurance on delivery timescales, you really get to do that. And the phrase that we use to sum that up is digital rehearsal. So for us, we're digitally rehearsing what we want to build and validating that in the virtual world before we go to site. And for us, that's immensely powerful. And our clients that understand that, they see the value of that, and in simplistic terms, they want more of that because that improves their delivery.
Absolutely. And so to what extent are you seeing kind of digital twins as being essential for the maintenance of the existing railway, or are there the benefits kind of primarily for new infrastructure projects? Paolo, I'll come to you first.
I think in terms of digital twins and the existing railway, I think what we're seeing really is a process of digitization. So in simplistic terms, you have all these disparate assets, and slowly but surely we're able to connect those assets into a common data environment. So existing assets perhaps that are under operation and maintenance regimes, for example, as we design them or as we draw them, as we then tag them, as we then kind of monitor them, we're able to then really bring that to the fore and get the benefit of a digital twin, because you start to be able to do things like predictive maintenance, where something, for example, an escalator, it's not something we're directly involved in, but there are tools now for monitoring escalators. You can predict when they're going to go wrong just from the vibrations that are coming off of them. So really, I think it's as applicable to existing infrastructure and existing assets as it is to new. In some respects, the new it's easier to bake in, but as we have to go back and interfere, renovate, renew the old, they're all slowly but surely becoming digitized themselves. And so all the benefits that we described previously, you'll see that on existing assets too. And if anything, we'll be better at maintaining them because we'll have more predictive ability and more experience, and in many respects, an ability to actually find the information. Because a lot of, in London, for example, TfL, a lot of the infrastructure was built such a long time ago that as it gets digitized, that just improves everyone's ability to then maintain it, work on it, and deliver more efficiently. So I think it's applicable across the whole value chain of, asset ownership and construction.
Would you agree, Kuldeep?
Yeah, I think Paolo puts that really well. I mean, I'm definitely going to steal his digital rehearsal sort of catchphrase. I think that's fantastic.
It's great, sharing knowledge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're doing it right now, live, as they say. I think we absolutely agree. Digital twins are providing that increasing level of efficiency in the design build phases. In terms of existing maintenance, as it were, I think it's at a subsystem level. So we talk about track. We have a lot of our track being monitored, bridges, structures across the railway industry, lifts and escalators, as it were. And that provides us with that insight to how really what we're after is behavior, system behavior. And I think we get that. And what that enables us to do is say, okay, look, something's not right here. Should we have an intervention? And that means that we can be more efficient. I think, if I'm going to be honest, I'm going to touch upon what Paolo said, and this is for the entire industry. Due to the long lifespan of many of the assets in the rail industry and other industries as well. Really, a lot of the system is still in dark space because we are waiting for that renovation or that renewal or that capital program to bring things live. So I think we have a challenge to say we have the entire system as a digital twin, but certainly I know that there's some brilliant stuff happening in terms of subsystems and specific decision support. And to talk about live, as in maintenance intervention is still potentially hours, mean time to repair, whatever it may be. But I know that Birmingham University are working with Network Rail. They are now looking at almost running simulations before decisions are made, not just in schemes, but in terms of operational decisions, such that decision support is based on a simulated digital twin. And they are taking live feed from assets. And that's the goal. At the end of the day, we want telemetry. We want all our assets to be live. We want all that data to be aggregated. And we want to be able to assess the behavior of the system and therefore understand potential future events. That's the goal. And to make sure that system is available to the most important people, which are our customers. So I think it is being used. I think it is being used slightly differently to the construction and build phase, but it has to be the way forward.
Yeah, and they're very much linked. What we're seeing at the moment, for example, on a new build project, but in a sense, it's they're kind of building the future, which is on HS2. There's a lot of time and effort going into asset tagging. So if you like, they're building the kind of infrastructure, they're building the almost like the future library of how they're going to run the asset. And so the construction industry, the asset owners themselves, that knowledge will transfer across, and so you get a feedback loop into the industry. So I can only see this increasing more and more.
Yeah,
retrofitting slowly will pick all the existing infrastructure up.
Agree. Retrofitting is difficult because what you're really introducing is a small subsystem that may fail in its own right. And I think actually what we've got to do is ensure that this is enabled in everything we build or buy for the future.
So can you give us a bit more of an idea of that relationship between kind of modelling and simulation on projects and digital twin? What's the relationship? How does that work? Coldeep, if I come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think modelling and simulation is very dear to my heart. I helped build the team in TfL, and really we have extracted huge amounts of value from very complex modelling and simulation, and that has only accelerated as computing power has accelerated. So, for example, we at one stage we used to have potentially one simulation which could be delivered in 2 weeks, as it were, maybe at a cost of a few £1,000s. We're doing over 2,500 simulations a night now. And what that enables us to do is react and be agile when it comes to change. And let's face it, when you are delivering something as complex as what's behind me in terms of bank station or especially things like HS2, that reaction and that agility to understand and quickly is really important because obviously time is money. We do have many people out on site. We want to move forward. And what we want to do is actually use that modeling and simulation and therefore make better decisions. The key, I think, is moving modeling and simulation from the sort of center of the life cycle really right to the start of the life cycle. So you're using it to design your schemes or instruct your schemes, understand the scope prior to using them right in the heart of the program itself. And the impact I've seen in terms of modeling and simulation capability is huge. For the Victoria Line upgrade, for example, it was that modeling and simulation capability that enabled us to move and understand what it would take to get to 36 trains per hour, one of the highest train frequencies in Europe, and also understand from an energy perspective. So from a modeling and simulation perspective, it used to be a single train. Now it's multi-train, it's multi-signaling, it's power, it's track wear, it's reliability, and what you can then say is, okay, what would happen if we had low loss conductor rail in terms of our power usage? Well, that's quite important. A substation can be quite expensive to build. If you need less of them, you can now start to understand how you operate the system and the behaviors you're expecting. But also what you can start to do now is say, actually, if we're reducing the energy actually delivered into the system, which is far more sustainable for the long term, what you can also now start doing is saying, actually, we need less infrastructure to remove the heat, which is a particular problem on the underground itself. So I would say modeling and simulation as a broad term, I think that was the original digital twin. And at the end of the day, they have been used for some time in many asset groups. And what we're really now doing is expanding that concept in saying, actually, how do we model and create a digital twin, not just of the assets themselves and their behavior, we're certainly linking them now, but actually of the environment itself, such as the natural environment that they sit within. And that includes people and operational processes.
Paolo, over to you.
I think from our perspective, we obviously start at the front end of a project in the design phase. And so what we're seeing is really an increasing interlinking between different packages. So when we design in 3D. That's a norm for us now. I don't think we practically never now work in 2D. Bringing it to 4D, which we're doing at the moment with our 4D packages, that then takes you into that realm. But what we're then seeing is the link to things like sustainability, because we're able to measure and make decisions because we have the data sets now. So we have a tool that we've developed internally called Magpie, and that allows us to measure and essentially KPI all of the data sets in our model. So as a design evolves, we can report back to our clients on what the carbon intensity is, what decisions can be made to reduce that, et cetera, et cetera. And then that carries through into that kind of delivery model. And as we get data or common data environments that start talking to each other, you're going to see the models that we produce at a front end become very much, if you like, one of the building blocks of the tools that then Kuldeep and his team as an operator will use to create that bigger environment. So I think from our perspective, you can see this trend of everything starting to talk to each other a lot more and becoming much more integrated. And I think from a decision-making point of view, as a designer, that's really powerful, because a lot of the time, from a designer's perspective, or even a contractor's perspective, many decisions are very intuitive. But if you've actually got a data set that's based on other work that you've done or feedback from an operating system in terms of what works, you can then really start to make the right decisions. And there was a particular project we were working on where we looked at the life cycle for cathodic protection of an existing system, and we were able to model what an intervention would look like, but also what a non-intervention would look like. And we were able to make a decision based not only on capital cost, but also on sustainability grounds. And so when you've got existing assets like that, when you can start making those decisions and taking life cycle costs into account, I think you end up with a much better design. Holistic's an overused word, but actually, if we're serious about sustainability, if we're serious about making decisions that are the best decisions in the long term, then that's really important. And if I look at some of my younger engineers that come into the business, it's a value that they want to bring into their work. It's not for them, it's not about ticking boxes, it's how they want to design, it's how they want to contribute, and how they want to essentially make things better. So for us, I think this is a massive enabler as an industry.
I agree. I was just going to add to that modeling and simulation component. I mean, really, I think one of the end goals is to drive that simulation with live feeds from the system itself. And then you're not emulating anymore. You are actually taking live data, driving that simulation to get a real reaction, as it were. And I think we're not far away from that as an industry. I think we're very close.
So in terms of that data, I mean, how important is it to continue improving access to good data and having that open data sets? Kuldeep, I'll come to you first.
It's really important. It's vital. I mean, talking about just generally open data itself, I know the government launched, I think it's called the Rail Data Marketplace, a couple of weeks ago. They're going to invest 5 million in terms of a platform with partnership with industry. And I think that's going to move forward and really move the customer sort of support in terms of access to data, certainly forward. In terms of TfL, we've had an open data policy for a long time now. And we're at the vanguard of that. And I think that's really been beneficial and sort of shown the way in terms of what benefit that can have, not just for the people who use our system. We know that there are 600 apps powered by TfL data, 42% of Londoners use that, but it's economic benefits. Independent reports have said that's £113 million worth of savings for our travellers, for London and TfL itself. So certainly open data, I think, is a goal. Our data is open, and I think when you get that rail data marketplace, I think that will really be interesting to see what comes of that. I don't know, it's early thinking at this moment in time. In terms of data from our assets specifically, well, when we're building them and working with people like Paolo and others, I think it's fairly straightforward to instrument our major infrastructure and then almost have it waiting to be sort of connected into a space where the data can be aggregated. I think you get a bit more of a challenge when you're looking at specific subsystems like, say, trains or signaling. Why? Because part of the product now that people buy is often a maintenance system or an optimization regime. So the OEM will in effect take that data and optimize the system, and it will be a value add or a sell add, as it were. What that can do in certain areas is limit the access to that data so it can be aggregated for understanding general system behavior. So yeah, you may understand that rolling stock in great depth, but actually really what we want to do is understand that rolling stock, how it's interacting with the track, what's current power draw maybe, the general environment in terms of wind speeds potentially, and also the environment in terms of weather. And when you start aggregating at that level, you start to get an understanding of the system and its environment and its operation. And at our level as an integrated transport authority, that's really insightful. And I think that is a goal, not just for TfL, that will be a goal for many industries. What do you think, Paolo?
No, I couldn't agree more. I think that we also really, I think, benefit from a government environment that's been hugely supportive. If you take it back to BIM, for example, the UK was one of the early adopters and has been a leader in BIM, and many companies from around the world have come to the UK to learn those lessons. And I think the government's continued building on those successes with things like Innovate UK, where they funded open source data models. So, for example, there's a Bureau Happold-led system called BHOM, for example, which Innovate UK has been funding, and there are other platform type systems. And so I think that combination of the government, if you like, intervening and supporting the growth of this has been really important. And that, in having the government as a sort of sponsor for that, I think will continue to drive the kind of open source nature of it. And from our perspective, we think open source is really important because you get more innovation. If I look at some of the tools that we use quite a lot, like Dynamo and Grasshopper, they're very much open source style tools. And there's a YouTube page that explains everything. And so when more people can access that, more people are bringing their ideas to the table, you increase that level of connectivity. So I don't think that's going to go away. I think it will increase. And I think it will, if we keep going down that path, I think we'll be able to maintain leadership in that, what I'd call, the digital asset space. And I think that's important for the UK to try and build on those successes, because they've been significant in my opinion. And I've worked abroad, and quite often when you would see clients' briefs come back, they would quite often be referencing UK standards and approaches. So I think that's a real success story actually that underpins all this.
Yeah, I agree.
So we've spoken about a lot of the benefits and the opportunities in terms of digital twin. So can you talk me through some of the potential barriers that you're seeing when it comes to digital twin technology? Obviously we've spoken about data and some of the potential issues there. Are there any other things that you're seeing, Paolo?
There's a few. One is, I suppose, the complexity of systems, and Kuldeep will probably know a lot more about that than myself, given the different systems that they run. But it's getting things to talk to each other. And that takes time because some people, they have their reasons for trying to close off the data. So I think there's a risk on that. And the government, again, is trying to support, and there are contractors, for example, in the construction space, trying to support open data initiatives where we exchange data that's been anonymized, as it were, so we can all start to try and join the dots and connect things up. But I think that the biggest probably challenge at the moment that we see is probably skills and training. Digital natives know their value, and they're increasingly more knowledgeable of their value. And if you like, there's a, if you like, a wave that they're riding, and so finding the right people and being enticing, not only with, let's say, a financial and a work package, but also with the right sort of work that's going to keep them motivated. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we see. And so as a business, we're having to invest a lot more in that. And we're doing that in a very positive way, I think. But at the same time, I think that's going to be the constraint on the industry. And so I think there will be bottlenecks for a while until this, if you like, this cohort of digital natives works its way through the system, and then it becomes the new norm. And so I think we're still in that transition phase, personally.
Coldeep, I can see you nodding away.
Yeah, Paolo, I mean, that's so eloquent the way that Paolo has described it. It's absolutely right. Skills and attracting people to this industry with those skills. And, you know, it has to be, you know, we'd absolutely want to make TfL a great place to work, and the package is important, but we are competing with a huge industry if you have those skills. And I think that is one of the challenges we've got, that the general sort of population, in terms of, you know, ensuring that the people coming out of school, going into university, you know, we need to make sure the skills are there for us to tap into that, because otherwise it will hold us back. We won't be as efficient, and, you know, that negative cycle could be a challenge for us. I think we've talked about data in terms of open data. I think even when the data is available, getting it to talk to each other, as they say, if I put it that bluntly, can be a challenge. So, you know, standardization, meta models, ensuring that aggregation, that federation of models, you know, so my model is absolutely in line with what Paolo's creating, etc., because that bigger picture can only be beneficial for the UK. And I think that is a government goal. That is, I think, a goal for all transport operators as well. And in effect, what that means is we don't have to create our own huge digital twin. What we can do is connect others that have been created by other people, and to see a different value from it. And I think that's important. I mean, I would bring in at this point, I don't know if you've heard of Gartner's hype cycle. And you know, if I asked Paolo openly and said, look, do you think, if you know the cycle well, are we at the peak of inflated expectations? Are we heading to the trough of disillusionment? And when do you think we're going to get to the plateau of productivity?
In construction, the plateau of productivity is an ongoing problem. Is what I'd say. I think we're in a hype phase, but I think that things are going to change massively. And the phrase that I always, I think it's attributed to Bill Gates, I might be wrong, I think he said something like, people underestimate, so they overestimate the amount of change is it in 10 years, but underestimate in 5 years or overestimate in 10. But basically things move really quickly, but they move quickly very slowly, because you don't necessarily notice them because it's changing every day. And a phrase I often use internally is, you know, it's incremental gains. And I think we're going to see the real benefits of that. We see the new norm. We see what we call a new norm on each of our projects. A new project comes in, it's picking up lessons learned from another one that was done 2 months ago. And that just moves the dial. So are we at peak? I don't think we're at the peak yet. I think there's a lot more to come. And I think we're going to see it much quicker than people anticipate. And I think that's in the next 5 years, you're going to see real changes in the way we deliver things.
No, that's well said. I think for me, there are some other barriers. I think it's culture. You know, we absolutely need to build the right culture where we talked about skills, but people with those skills feel absolutely comfortable in applying them in our environment. So we have to be agile and fast moving. Otherwise, this may not be the environment that they feel that they can add the biggest value. And I think I see that change. And I think the other element is use cases. So if we are, when I mean use cases, I mean actual pounds in the ground type benefits. And I think we can all sort of sense them. I think we can feel them. I think capturing them and saying it's because of this has always been a challenge for many industries, not just the transport industry. And sometimes I think for me that what that requires is then thought leadership. I think, you know, having that thought leadership, people like Paolo stretching us to that point, what that does is it gives you that sort of, that lighthouse approach in terms of that's the direction we're heading. It is a bit of a leap of faith sometimes, and that can be a struggle in industries like transport and construction. But I think it's overwhelming that actually those benefits will be realized. The challenge is changing the culture and embedding and then capturing those benefits. But I think when we get there, no one will be actually saying what were the benefits, because it will be the new norm, like Paolo mentioned. No one questions the benefit of actually how important safety is anymore. It is something that's so embedded within our culture. And I think things like this will become like that too.
Yeah, and I think it also touches upon, in trying to attract talent into an industry, we're looking at apprenticeships, we're looking at bringing people in from backgrounds that necessarily wouldn't normally be represented in the construction industry, and we're trying to change those perceptions. And the generation that's coming through, they understand technology. It's and technology to us, I'm the Betamax generation. To them, that is very normal. And so when you can digitize an industry, or if you like, a work environment that doesn't seem very digital, you're also able to attract a new type of talent into that industry, because they can start to see opportunities that they didn't think were there, things that they were interested in.
Yeah.
And I think that digitization of our industry, certainly from where I sit, is very fundamental to bringing in a new generation of talent into the industry as well. I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah, I just want to, that is such an important thing you said. And that culture change, we talked about new skills, but really we're also talking about diversity of thought. And that diversity of thought brings with it new ways of working, thinking, innovation. And that is the lifeblood of any productivity improvement gain or efficiency movement in any organization. And I think people have recognized that. And I think that'll be a really powerful sort of movement in the future and now, as it were, especially in TfL. We know how important that is for us. Otherwise you will be doing the same things the way you've done them for a long time.
I think that's a really, really important point, and actually a great point to end on, because unfortunately we've run out of time. But thank you both for joining us today. And now it's time for our final session of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.